Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people think they can have whatever they want, whenever they want, because they're special. And in today's episode, a Karen learns why you should never try to forcefully grab someone's baby from their arms. It's such a ridiculous story. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And hey, subscribe if you haven't. Let's dive into some fun stories, shall we? So I'm a software engineer with a full-time job and a side hustle of doing freelance coding work in my own time. I've always been the type to have a side hustle that I put a lot of my free time into, as I get really bored sitting idle. My freelance hourly rates are $60 an hour, and at my full-time job, my hourly pay works out to be about $40 an hour. So that's how I value my time. Anyways, over Christmas vacation, I was staying at my parents' house. My cousin was also staying over with her 3 young kids from Christmas to New Year's. I'd been planning on doing some work on my freelance projects when I had free time in the mornings, when my family had no plans. I wasn't in any rush. I was already ahead of schedule on them all, but I didn't really have anything else to do. It was in a really rural area, and it's like an hour drive to the nearest anything. Then my cousin and her husband asked if I could babysit all day for 3 days, so they could visit some friends in the area and hang out with adults only. I said I planned on doing some freelance work at the library, and she offered to pay me to babysit. I said I could if they got close to my freelance rates. She wanted a number, and although my freelance rates are $60, I didn't feel that was right. It was too high, but I didn't want to go too low. Honestly, babysitting 3 kids all day would be harder for me than routine coding work. I don't know a lot about kids, and I've never babysat for long, and I had a feeling it would be stressful and difficult. So I said $35, which is below what I make hourly at work. It's also the bare minimum that I'd value my time for, if that time is spent doing difficult work. At this, she went crazy on me, saying that's a ridiculous rate for babysitting, and said that I was being entitled and selfish, that I'm trying to take advantage of how she didn't have other options. I said that's way below what I'd be making if I had time to do my own work, and that I'd be putting off my own work to babysit. Her husband then gets mad at me saying that I'm a 24-year-old girl, and that I'm damn near a child myself, that my time is not worth that much, and it's childish and entitled to say that it is. He ended up calling me a stupid girl for not knowing that babysitting costs like $15 an hour. He also said that when I decide to grow up and have kids of my own, I will see how stupid I was being. Now, I was kind of done with being called stupid, so I just told him that I'd hope they could find someone else. My mom thinks I asked for something offensive, and my cousin and her husband obviously did too. Am I in the wrong? Personally, I'd say of course you're not. The parents are definitely the entitled ones in this one. First of all, for not thinking that Opie's time is worth more than $15 an hour in their eyes, as she's still a child, at 24 mind you. And secondly, for failing to plan ahead and expecting her to watch all 3 kids all day for 3 days straight. Because family. Okay guys, so since we're on the topic of babysitting, the next story is a babysitter's nightmare. So I'm 19 years old now, but when I was 16, I used to babysit as I was educating myself for childcare and it would look really good on my resume. I love kids and I enjoyed the work. I took $10 an hour and nobody ever had a problem with this as I cooked, did dishes, and didn't charge extra for multiple kids. And I also activated the kids mentally. I had a few regulars and then enters the Karen. Now Karen's a friend of my 3 regulars that got my number from Jolene, fake name. Jolene's a mother of 4 kids that I had every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. So Karen calls me and she asked if I could watch her daughter on Wednesday in her home. This was the conversation. Karen says, "Hey, I need you to watch my daughter this Wednesday from 6 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. You need to show up at 5 a.m. so I can see you with her." At this, I say to her, hey, sorry, but I have Jolene's kids every Wednesday. My friend from school also babysits, so I could ask her for you. At this, Karen says, "No, I want you to do it. Jolene's the one who gave me your number, so it's fine." At this, I say, I have to ask her first. Karen then says, "No, you're not gonna ask her. You are going to trust me." Now, I should have ran right there, but I needed the money, and the time she was asking would have earned me roughly $175. So I called Jolene and asked about it. Jolene said she needed me that Wednesday, but she also said it was a lot of money that she knew I needed, so she took my friend's number and said it was fine. So I contacted Karen again. I tell her, okay, I'm gonna show up at 5 a.m. There's no need to pay for the observational hour. At this, Karen says, "Good, see you then." Oh wait, I have one more question. How old's your daughter, so I'm fully prepared? Karen tells me that she's 3 months old, and I say, "Oh, so are you gonna leave a schedule and food and stuff? She's really young, so I assume you'll want her to be bottle fed and have a strict sleeping time?" At this, Karen says, I'll leave food. If she cries, just try things until she stops. I tell her, okay, I'm gonna see you Wednesday. I then tell her that $10 an hour is my rate. Now, I was really nervous already because it was a really young child and the mother had a really weird attitude. But again, I was young and I really needed the money. So I show up at 5 a.m. and immediately the woman hands me her baby, who is already crying, and she just walks out the door. That left me really confused, as she said she wanted to observe us together, but I just assumed she was called in early or something. I bounced the baby and got her to sleep, and that's when I noticed how dirty everything was. So I decided that since the baby was sleeping, that I'd do some cleaning and put the food I brought for the day in the fridge. And that's when I realized that there was no baby formula or breast milk anywhere. I texted Karen, but she didn't answer, so I called my friend and asked her to pick up baby formula and come over with it real quick, as I couldn't leave this poor baby hungry. I sent her some of my own money to get it, and that was that. The baby was still asleep, so I put a pillow on the floor next to the crib, as she had no baby monitor, and I got some sleep. About 11 a.m., the baby wakes up and I feed her. The whole day went rather smoothly. I did the laundry, the dishes, cleaned the house, and took the baby for a long walk in the stroller. The baby was really young, so she mostly slept, and that's why I did all that housework. Well, 11:30 p.m. rolls around, and the baby's sound asleep, and I'm sitting in her room, just waiting to go home. Karen comes home, and I walk out there, and this was the conversation. Karen says, "Hey, why is my house not clean?" And let me tell you right now, the difference was huge. She then asked about her baby, and I say, she's sound asleep. She's been an angel all day. Karen says, She's not a calm child, so how did you manage that? I then say to her, you know what, we had no problems, but I noticed that there was no food, so I had a friend bring over some formula, but I need to be paid back for that. I'll include it in the... And that's when Karen interrupts me and says, excuse you? Of course she needs food. What did you expect? And why is my house not clean? Now, mind you, I'm paid to babysit, but I cleaned and stuff at the other houses, but it's no guarantee. And again, the house was way cleaner than before. I then say to her, yeah, but you said you would leave food, and I'm not a maid, I'm a babysitter, so I would like that money back with my payment, please. At this, Karen shrieks, payment? Yeah, my money. You want money for this? You're delusional, and you won't get a dime from me. Now, at this point, I was in shock and so close to crying. I could usually manage the social anxiety around the kids and parents, but I was so close to having a full breakdown at this. Karen then says, you probably didn't even care for my baby. All you basically did was hang around and watch her sleep. I will not pay you crap. So after she screamed at me, I was crying and having shortness of breath. And then the woman physically pushes me out of her house and slams the door in my face. I walk until I see a bench. I then sit down and start crying, shaking and having a full breakdown. I was only 16, and I thought she could and would do everything she said. After a while, I called my father, who had been super worried about me as I wasn't home yet. He came and got me home, as I was still crying and telling him about what happened. He was visibly upset, but I guess he mostly wanted me to get home to my medication, dog, and bed. The next day, I wake up at about 1 p.m., and my phone was blowing up. The woman was cussing me out because my dad had called the other parents I babysit for, the police, and CPS because of how she treated me. After a few anxiety attacks, my dad came home and blocked her number. I was called by the police and CPS later on to give statements, and I was so nervous, but I told them everything. I got an outpour of love from the other parents and never heard anything about her again. So, to the woman who left her child without food with a complete stranger, who was ungrateful, expected a lot from a 16-year-old, refused to pay me at all, and then physically assaulted me, I hope your daughter got a better home, and you got the worst possible punishment. She sounds like a terrible human being. Yeah, come watch my 3-month-old, and I won't leave any formula or breast milk, and while you're at it, clean my house. Oh, and another thing, you know how I said I was gonna pay you after 17 hours of work? I lied. My question is, where the heck did she go from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m.? This story takes place at a local coffee shop. This happened when my daughter was about 4 months. One afternoon, after our mommy and me yoga class, me and baby decided to get a coffee and catch up. Well, I would get coffee. She would get that sweet, sweet booby milk. Well, baby being the lightweight she is, she passes out after the boob milk. I decide to be wild and get that second cup of coffee. So as I'm drinking my second cup of coffee, a wild Karen walks in with her daughter, who looked to be about 5 years old. And immediately I hear the daughter say, "Aw, a baby." At that, I smile, but I go back to reading the news and sipping my coffee when out of nowhere, the daughter rushes over to try to pick up my sleeping baby. I panicked, obviously. I started yelling, "No, no, 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 no." And Karen comes in and says, "Oh, she wasn't hurting her." At this, her daughter yells, "Mommy, I want to hold the baby." I tell her she's sleeping, and you're too little to hold her, honey. She's heavy. Karen hears me say this, and she says, "Oh, just let her hold her. My daughter may look small, but she's very mature." I told her, "No, she's not a baby doll. You can't." At this, Karen replies, "You don't have to be a bitch." Excuse me? Now, during this time, her daughter did try to pick up my baby and woke her up. Baby starts crying, so I pick her up and start hushing her. I say to them, "See what you did? Leave us alone." Karen then says, "She just wants my daughter to hold her. Here." She then reaches out and tries to grab my baby, and I scream, "Get away from us. Just let her hold her." Now, the woman keeps her arms out in hopes that I'll pass my baby to her, and she's literally trying to steal my baby. I then say help and swat at her face with my free hand. At this point, the coffee shop employees jump in and pull her away. One of them says that they called the police. The mother's nose is bleeding, the kid is sobbing, and I kind of feel bad for the kid. She's pretty little, but her mom should teach her better. The employees then ask us to stay and wait for police, while the woman's screaming that I just assaulted her and traumatized her child. My baby's still crying, so I give her a boob to calm her down, and that's when Karen screams, "Ew! She's exposing herself in public! My child is right here, you pedo!" I ignore her, and baby finally calms down and the police come, and they ask us each what happened. The woman screams that I exposed myself to her daughter and then assaulted her. Now, at this point, I'm scared that I'm gonna go to jail, and I do regret hitting her in the face. I tell the officer, "That's not true. She tried to steal my baby. I was just protecting her." Luckily, the coffee place did have cameras. The police took a look and clearly saw me hitting her as self-defense. The woman gets arrested for attempted kidnapping. I have to go to court for it next month. So a little update. We go to court on April 14th for the criminal charges against the mom for attempted kidnapping. Now, I didn't expect to update before then, but then this happened. So me and baby went to the park this morning and we got back around 11 a.m. There was a man standing on our porch looking lost, and baby was in her stroller sleeping. I asked the man, "Can I help you?" The man says he's looking for first name, last name, as I have a package for her. He then pulls out a thick envelope, and I say, "I'm her, I can take it." So I then find out he's a legal intern. The guy lets me know that the woman's suing me. Yep, that's right, I'm being sued by Karen. Now, why would the woman who tried to snatch my baby be suing me? And how much damage could I have inflicted? Well, apparently I did $25,000 in damage. In this poor envelope was about 10 million pages detailing how she's suing me for everything that's wrong in her life. Apparently I had broken her nose, so she's suing me for not only the related medical bills, but she also wants me to pay for them to fix her pre-existing toad nose. And of course, she's suing me for emotional damages to her and her child. Apparently, Karen's now suffering from anxiety and depression because of me. Finally, I'm also being sued for slander and character assassination, which in layman's terms is ruining her reputation because how dare I say she tried to steal my baby. And of course, at the end, she said she'd be willing to settle out of court if I would drop the criminal charges. Well, with that, I took the letter to my lawyer, and he said the judge would laugh her out of court, especially if the criminal trial does go in our favor, which is basically guaranteed. So I will be seeing her in court on April 14th, and I'll see her again in July for the civil case. Guys, that's absolutely wild. Leave it up to an entitled Karen to twist things around to make OP look like the bad guy in this situation, right? Like, what the heck was she thinking? How dare that mom defend herself against me trying to grab her newborn out of her arms? I'm gonna sue the crap out of her. Now, of course, OP has this juicy part 2 right here, guys, and it's freaking amazing. Firstly, thanks to everybody for the support and love. I can't wait to tell baby all about this when she gets older. Wednesday, we found out the verdict on the entitled mom, the Karen. So this chapter opens up on April 15th, 2019, approximately 9:30 a.m. We're at the local courthouse. Me and Mr. had dropped off baby at his mother's. Now, I had considered bringing her and breastfeeding while the mom was on the stand just to irritate her, but I didn't think an 8-month-old would be able to sit quietly for that long. Instead, I brought my 384-month-old husband. So we went to the courthouse, and I'll admit that I was nervous. We took our seats behind the prosecutor, and we were just chatting with her. Karen then enters with her lawyer, and if looks could kill, I would be dead. Then the judge and jury enter, and we're ready to get started. Now, disclaimer, these were 3 very long, very stressful days, so I will be paraphrasing a lot. The judge looks at Karen and says, "Ma'am, you are charged with attempted kidnapping, first-degree assault, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct. How do you plead?" At this, Karen says, "Your Honor, I'm 100% innocent. In fact, I'm outraged that I stand accused of wrongdoing. I'm a proud American and the biggest supporter of these proud, fair, and just..." The judge interrupts her, looking already done with her, and says, "Please sit down, now." At that, the mom sits, and the judge says, "We will now proceed to opening statements. Prosecutor?" The prosecutor lays out the case, explaining that the Karen was a dangerous woman who attempted to rip a small baby from its mother's arms. With this, Karen screams, No, that's not true." The judge then looks to the lawyer and says, "Hey, tell her to be quiet." Prosecutor continues and says, "There is clear, indisputable evidence that this woman is guilty on all counts." The prosecutor wraps up his opening statement in under 5 minutes, explaining that the whole situation was caught on tape and that the evidence will speak for itself. The defense's opening statement was about 40 minutes long. He pretty much gave this woman's whole life story, how she couldn't possibly be guilty. How she was your typical suburban soccer mom, president of the HOA, active in her church, blah blah blah. Now, apparently because the statements established character, they weren't off topic enough to make the judge tell her lawyer to shut up and sit down. The lawyer talked so long that after they concluded, the judge dismissed us for the day. So we come back the second day, and before the trial starts, my husband goes and grabs us a cup of caffeine from the booth in the courthouse. He's putting his cream and sugar in it when I guess her husband approaches. The guy says to him, "Hey man, how you doing?" My husband says fine. The guy says, "This whole mess is crazy, right? Look man, what's gonna happen to my daughter if her mom goes to jail? It's not good for the kid." My husband tells him, "Yeah, that's rough, sorry." The guy then says to my husband, "Well, could you tell your wife to just drop the charges? You know, do what's best for the kids?" At this, my husband says, "Yeah, I'm not gonna do that." He then says, "Come on, man, be reasonable." To which my husband says, "If your wife was reasonable, we wouldn't even be here." So the second day of court starts. The prosecution lays out the evidence, including the tape, calls witnesses, and all that prosecution stuff. When the prosecution calls witnesses, the defense also gets to ask them questions. They were trying to cast doubt on all the witnesses, I guess to make it seem like it was all a witch hunt against the entitled mom. Finally, it was my turn to testify and be questioned. I told the story for the prosecution, and then this foolishness ensued. Karen's lawyer says to me, "So, it seems that you were the first one to raise your voice. Would you say this is accurate?" I tell him, "I suppose so. So, that would make you the instigator." I tell him, "I don't think..." He then cuts me off and says, "You claimed that this woman assaulted you." "Yes." "Did she strike you at any point during this altercation?" I then say to him, "Well, not exactly strike." He says, "Did you strike her at any point?" "Yes, but that was too..." He then stops me and says, "The jury will notice that this woman has admitted to not only being the instigator, but also the aggressor in this situation." After the prosecution lays out their evidence, it's the defense's turn. It's at this point Karen takes the stand, and she twisted her version of events. So, according to her, her daughter had seen my baby and had approached me to tell me how beautiful the baby was. Now, in response to this totally innocent interaction, I apparently began verbally abusing her daughter. Karen says how she attempted to calm me, but this backfired. Apparently, when I violently snatched up the baby, she couldn't help but notice that it was very unlikely that the baby was mine. She saw an unstable woman snatching up an innocent, probably kidnapped baby, and she just had to intervene. When she did, I viciously attacked her and broke her nose. That was her story. So day 3 is the verdict and sentencing. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, the jury decided that there was not enough evidence to conclude that she wanted to kidnap my baby, so not guilty. On the charge of assault, the jury was not convinced by her lawyer's attempts to demonize me. Guilty. On disturbing the peace and disorderly conduct, the tapes and witnesses led to a guilty verdict. Now we get to the part where you've all been waiting for, the sentencing. So the woman was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 40 hours of community service, 30 hours of anger management, and $730 in fines. This all goes on her criminal record, and if she violates her probation or doesn't do what's required, she will spend those 18 months in prison. Now, while I know many of us were hoping for jail time, I'm pretty satisfied with this outcome, and I think it's fair. We left feeling pretty good, and we have to go back to court in a few months for the civil case. So there you have it, guys. The moral of the story is, don't try to grab people's babies, because you might end up getting punched in the nose and end up in court. Guys, OP had every right to go mama bear mode and defend her daughter from this crazy woman who wouldn't back down from trying to grab at her kid. And that's a terrifying situation to be in for the mother. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our slash entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed these crazy stories today and you didn't shake your heads too much. If you missed the last episode on the channel, I'll link it right here. It's a pro-revenge episode where OP's girlfriend cheats on him and he gets revenge on her and the guy she cheated with. It's such a satisfying story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.